just to really facilitate that lengthened and stretched out position as much as, holy shit, I just snapped off. Anyway, I'm gonna go grab that right after I finish talking. Hey guys, welcome back to my lifting journey. Today's episode is going to be all about how we can get the most hypertrophic response out of some very, very common movements. We're actually going to be doing 4 lifts today, and I'm going to be sharing what I deem to be the most important cues in order to see the most results. So it's actually going to be more of a technical form episode. And today's workout is going to consist of 4 sets of the barbell Romanian deadlift with around 5 to 12 repetitions, followed by 4 sets of the leg press with around 8 to 12 repetitions. Then after that, we're going to get into some isolation work with 3 sets of the seated leg curl of around 10 to 15 reps. And then lastly, we're going to hit the quads and do some leg extensions for 3 sets of around 10 to 15 repetitions. And then, of course, I'm going to hit some calves, but that's going to be off camera. So, of course, we're starting with the compound lift or the Romanian deadlift, the barbell variation. And I'm actually going to be kind of playing it safe today. I'm just going to do 2 plates on each side. It's only 225 pounds. Yes, I can actually bench press this much weight. But I'm going to just be going a little bit lighter today and just kind of work my way into it because, honestly, it's been a little bit since I hit legs, a little bit too long for comfort. And when you take off a little bit longer on legs than you originally intended to, then it's going to be kind of a rude awakening from what I find. It seems like every other muscle group, you can just get in there and grip it and rip it, and you are going to be completely fine because there's so much just local fatigue. But with legs, it's really systemically fatiguing and it will really, really beat you up. So anyway, we're just going to be working on form. That's what today's episode is all about. Is just getting the most out of every single lift that we perform, form wise, in order to really, really trigger some growth. Okay. So with the barbell RDL, the main form tip I'm going to be using here is to really lock in a good tempo. Because with this exercise, I think that people tend to rush it. They tend to rush the range of motion. They tend to rush through their repetitions in terms of, they're dropping through the eccentric, which is actually the most hypertrophic zone for this lift, since it's really providing a lot of lengthened tension for not only the hamstrings, but also the glutes. So you really don't want to be rushing through that eccentric. I think that slowing that down and really being deliberate and controlled and really intentional with it is going to be the best way to go. And then additionally, go as far down as your mobility and your flexibility and your, range of motion will allow without any form breakdown. Really go as far down as you possibly can. And then lastly, we're just going to be really taking it at least to 0 to 3 RIR, which means reps and reserves. This is one of those exercises which people they'll do, but they're not doing. I hope that makes sense. But what I mean by that, if I'm going to elaborate, is just that people tend to do it, but just do it to the extent of, they can just check off the box that they did it for that day, which means that they're just going through the motions or they're rushing. So anyway, let's get into the first set. Oh, Jesus. Dang. You're never really prepared for 4 sets of barbell Romanian deadlifts, especially when you're really trying to key into the best form that you are individualized structure and anatomy can allow for, you know? So I'll just kind of break down each of the sets for you guys right now. First set felt really good because I was warmed up, I was fresh. That one, I was definitely the strongest. I got 225 for 10 reps. Second set, same deal, a little bit more fatigue, but I still got 225 for 10 reps. Third set, same deal, but way harder. I got 225 for 10 reps again. And this last one, I think that I just didn't rest long enough. That's something that if you guys really want to have really good form and really get the most out of the lift, you need to rest as long as it's going to take, depending on the exercise. You know, every exercise is different. If it's a compound lift, especially one that's involving like so many different muscle groups, like a hinge or a deadlift variation or a squat variation, you're going to need a lot longer to rest. I was probably resting 2 to 3 minutes in between each set, probably 3 minutes for the first 3, and this last one probably only rested 2 minutes, and I felt it. You know, it shaved off 2 reps. But to be honest, it's like 11 p.m. at night, and I have a watch. I don't know why I checked like that. And I worked all day, so I'm a little exhausted, and so I'm gonna give myself a little bit of slack for kind of rushing that last set. I'm also cutting, and I had a cheat day on accident a couple of days ago. Or no, sorry, it was last night. And therefore, I'm eating so little today in order to course correct because I'm trying to be really serious about my fitness. I've always been serious about it, but I'm trying to take it to the next level. I'm always constantly trying to improve. But anyway, if you guys will really want a good video on form, and even if you want to go deeper, like I'll be talking about the anatomy and the biomechanics, as well as proper variations and how to program the Romanian deadlift, and check out my video I just posted yesterday. And I think that it's a very, very good guide for RDLs. I know I don't have like the biggest legs on planet Earth. I know that my RDL form, it could always use some work. I think we're always constant projects. And so I'm not trying to claim to be like the #1 expert on the barbell Romanian deadlift, but I think I know a thing or two about lifting. So if you guys want some of my own insights, then check out that video. Unfortunately, the gym that I'm currently at, it's the only 24-hour fitness in my area that is actually 24 hours. And since it's so late at night, all of the other locations are closed. So I was kind of stuck with this one, which, you know, I thought it was totally fine until I couldn't find a really solid seated hamstring curl. This is the only one. Check this out. When you do a rep, it like brings the whole seat back, and there's nothing to like latch onto in order to actually lean forward, because that's my main tip. My main tip, and let me adjust a little bit. My main tip for the hamstring curl is that you really want to be going into hip flexion. Hip flexion, I'm just going to be bringing the knees more towards the chest and pushing the butt out, just like what we were doing with the hip hinge in the barbell Romanian deadlift. So by bringing the hips out, you're actually increasing the distance between the insertions and the origins of the 3 hamstring heads. So by increasing that distance, we're lengthening the hamstrings out, and therefore we are going to actually be providing a greater growth stimulus. So just by leaning forward, our hips are being pushed out relative to our knee, which is going to be stretching the hamstrings even more. This is very easily seen when you are doing this and then bending over. If you're bending over, you're causing hip flexion, and then you're gonna be able to feel a stretch on the hamstrings. This is the same exact motion, except we're seated. So that's my little hot tip for the hamstring curl. And then beyond that, just keep the form nice and controlled. Anyway, let's get into the first set. So I'm just gonna be leaning forward. Ooh. I think that it's really important to note that you really want to be achieving full knee extension when you are doing this exercise, because when you are fully extending the knee, that is going to maximally lengthen the hamstrings to the maximum degree. And if anything, you want to be extending as much as possible. This machine only goes up to this height, but I would love for it to go like a couple inches higher, just to really facilitate that lengthened and stretched out position as much as... Holy shit, I just snapped off. Anyway, I'm gonna go grab that right after I finish talking. So you really want to be getting that full knee extension in order to completely lengthen the hamstrings and get a stretch. And then I actually love to kind of hang out in that position and really milk that position as much as humanly possible. And that was kind of my philosophy for this exercise. And in terms of how I performed, I did whatever 8 is on here. I'm assuming, I have no idea how much weight it is. It doesn't feel that crazy heavy, but I did 8. It's just a number. I did number 8, and I did it for 10 reps for set 1, 10 reps for set 2, and 10 reps for set 3. So I was pretty consistent across the board, and I feel like my form was pretty down for all those. I think if I were to like redo this, I think that I would push it a little bit closer to failure. I feel like I had a little bit left in the tank afterwards, but honestly, I was just so annoyed by this machine. I am never going to do this machine ever again. I can promise you that. If I ever have to do legs here again and I'm filming my journey, then I'm going to opt for the prone hamstring curl instead. I prefer this variation because you get a greater degree of stretch under tension, but this machine sucks. So now this machine is more like it. This is definitely more my speed. Now, my form cue for the leg extension is pretty much the opposite as I had for the seated hamstring curl. But what do I mean by that? Well, for starters, the quads and the hamstrings are antagonistic, meaning they're doing opposite functions. So the quad is going to be all about knee extension, so straightening out the leg, while the hamstrings are all about knee flexion, so actually curling the legs. And therefore, I'm kind of using the same logic with the seated hamstring curl. I said that we really want to do hip flexion in order to fully lengthen out the hamstrings. Well, for the quads, what do you think it's going to be? It's going to be the exact opposite. So we're actually going to want a great degree of hip extension in order to fully lengthen out the quad. So actually, by leaning back as far as we can, we're going to be putting the quads under a greater stretch. That is with the caveat that we're fully flexing the knee as well. So we're really going to want to bring the knee as far back as we possibly can. And of course, it's going to really depend on your machine. So that's why I like this one, because I am getting my knees all the way back here. And then I also get to lean all the way back too. So I'm really providing a great stretch. And then beyond that, we're just using the same form cues that I've been sharing. And that's just keep a solid tempo, really focus on squeezing and being slow and deliberate and controlled. Let's get it. Oh, okay, that's the third set done. And if I were to reflect on this lift, God, it always comes back to more rest. I'm having the same issue as I did with the barbell Romanian deadlift. I kind of rushed from set 1 to 2. From 2 to 3, I did a little bit better, but 1 to 2, I think I only took like 30 seconds or something. I was kind of just in like, I got caught up in the moment. Honestly, for myself, I don't know if you guys are the same, but I may require like a stopwatch or something in order to time my rest period so that I don't just rush into it. Look, with an isolation lift like this, where I'm only using one joint to actually lift the weight, having long rest periods is not the biggest deal. I can definitely get away with less rest time. Anybody can get away with less rest time when we're just talking one joint, because one joint is inherently going to be using less muscles. In fact, it's almost surely only going to be using one muscle. Whatever muscle is going to be moving that joint. And in this case, it's the quads doing knee extension, just straightening out the leg. And therefore, it's not requiring too much rest. But that being said, I got 115 pounds for 12 repetitions on the first set. And then I stuck to 115, but I only got 10 repetitions on the second set. And then on the third set, I matched the first set and got 115 for 12 repetitions once again. So clearly the confounding variable in this recipe is that I didn't rest long enough between sets 1 and 2, because it should have been a cakewalk. And then additionally, I feel like I could have slowed down my tempo just a hair. I think it was pretty good. Something that I've really struggled with leg extensions is actually locking out and fully shortening the quads at the top, and really feeling that peak contraction. That's something that I really need to get used to. In fact, in general, I think quads are my biggest weak point for not only strength, but also aesthetics in my whole entire body. And I think that that's because I never really sank into that uncomfortable feeling that we all need to grow, to learn and love. Learn to... Yeah, it doesn't matter. What I'm trying to say is that quads in particular, all muscles of the lower body, but especially quads, you really need to learn how to like sink into it and to let it just be painful. Not like joint pain or anything, but just muscular pain. And if you do that properly, then they're gonna grow. I assure you that. All right, my friends. We come to the leg press, the main quad lift of today. And the reason why it's the main quad lift is because it's a compound lift. That's why it's going second, because it is involving so many muscles. It's involving 2 joints. We're talking the hip joint as well as the knee joint. And we're involving all the muscles behind those 2 movements or joints in order to leg press the weight away from our body. And my main form cues for this one is not going to be anything too fancy. If you guys were looking for some crazy secret, then you're probably going to be sadly mistaken. My main form cue is just to find your stance. Really, really work until you've found the perfect stance. And the perfect stance is going to check off a couple of criteria. Namely, it's going to be able to allow for the greatest range of motion that you can possibly achieve while still maintaining really good form. And for me, that's going to be, I have all of my toes and my heel firmly planted on the pad. So I don't want my heel raising. I don't want my toes to be raising. And then additionally, I'm going to be bringing my knees super far back to the point of really getting past that parallel. So imagine that you're doing a squat and your knees are at 90 like this. You really want to be getting past that 90-degree mark, past parallel. And you can imagine the leg press being in the same regard. So you really just want to get past that. This would be 90. Get past that as much as you can. And anything past that is just bonus points, you know. The deeper we can go, the more of a lengthened position it's going to put your muscles, and the more of, you know, that deep stretch factor under tension that we're going to get, which is really what we want. So find your stance. And then additionally, the way your toes are pointed is going to play a role. So when your toes are more pointed out, it's going to shift the emphasis more inward, versus if your toes are more in or you know, neutral, it's going to be more of the outer heads of the quads. And then, you know, if you're going like a wider stance, That's going to be involving more hip adductors, these muscles on the side of your thigh. And if you're going more narrow, then you're really just going to be involving more quads. However, you don't want to go too narrow because you don't want your knees to be hitting your face. That's going to be messing with one of the checklist items, which is the greatest range of motion in good form. So I like to kind of take like a shoulder width stance. It's going to be like slightly wider than my barbell RDL stance. As long as my knees can really travel back, I'm all for it. And then I have my toes slightly out, just ever so slightly. I'm not like pigeon toeing it where they're all the way back, because I'm just trying to get as much quad work as I can. So anyway, let's just get into the first set, shall we? All right, that wraps up the fourth set of the leg press. And for me, what I'm going to be working on is really finding that like fifth gear, that like next level gear to really bring the intensity, because I think that's really what's missing, what's separating me from achieving all the leg growth and strength that I want, and ultimately just staying stagnant like I have for too long with legs. So, I made a video a couple months ago, I think it was about a couple months ago, where the video was all about how do we find that next gear for leg training. And that was one of the hardest leg sessions that I ever did, because I was like, oh shit, I need to actually show up and show people that I know what I'm talking about and actually, find that next level of intensity. But I had so many like good little tidbits, good little pointers and tips that, I know all of them to be true, and I know that they personally aid me. But a lot of the times I don't follow my own advice. A ton of people, though, just give advice. But how many people actually follow their own advice? A lot of the times you just got to be like, oh, maybe I should follow my own advice. And this is one of those moments. So definitely where this could have been improved is doing more reps. For the first sets, I got, I'm doing 4 plates on each side. I think that's close to 400 pounds. And I did that for 12 repetitions. Pretty easy-ish. I mean, it was definitely like more grueling than the other sets. But I still feel like I could have gotten another rep or two. Maybe even made it up to 15, I'm not sure. But that was the most successful set. And from there, went downhill for the second set. Same weight, I stuck to the same weight, so I did straight sets. But I only got 10 repetitions for the second set. Same deal with the third, 10 repetitions. Or sorry, I didn't even get 10, I got 8. I got 8 repetitions for the remainder 3 sets. So I got 12 on the first one, 8 on the second, 8 on the third, and 8 on the fourth. So not ideal, I just kind of phoned it in, which is the last thing that I should be doing. And I'm sure that you guys are watching this and you're like, oh, why am I listening to this guy? He's just phoning in his exercises. I promise I'll make it up to you in the next leg day. And in fact, I'm going to go hit some more legs just to make it up to myself. But like I mentioned earlier, I worked all day. It's like 11:30 at night right now. I'm very, very tired. I'm malnourished. I've barely eaten today. Excuses. Everybody can make excuses all day long, kind of running all day. But at the bottom of the day, at the end of the day, you just have to do it. And for me, I showed up and I'm doing all my sets and I'm not cutting corners, except my rest periods could be longer and my sets could be a little bit more intense. But honestly, I got 99% of the way there, but that 1% is what separates the good from the great. So, going forward, more intensity, more rest times. That's what I'm taking out of this workout. And then on top of that, just keep working on the tempo. And then I hope that you guys took some good pointers out of this episode, because honestly, while I may not always bring as much intensity as I like, I always am careful to use the form cues that I know to be good and true. So, anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you drive some information out of it, and have a good one.